Hi Internet. Sorry that it's been so long. I know it's been about at least 6 months since I posted a video. It's been a crazy 6 months. I'm in grad school working and I just became a father a couple months ago, so it's been crazy. So today I'd like to talk about Ragtime by Doctorow. You may be familiar with the musical. It is actually based on this book. I'm not familiar with the musical, so I'm not sure what the differences are. I had to read the book for school. The first thing that captures my attention about this book is that right off the bat, they start talking about Houdini, and so it captured my attention immediately. For the first 50 pages or so, it seems like a series of vignettes that are unconnected and somewhat inconsequential. So it did take a little while to get into that. It wasn't that it was bad. I was hooked right away. I just had no idea where it was going. As the book progresses, something that you see is that there's a lot of interweaving between historical figures and fictional characters, and so there's a lot. Characters that are in this are Booker T. Washington, Houdini, Emma Goldman, who I wasn't familiar with, Evelyn Nesbit, who I wasn't familiar with. The book tells a few different stories that they do interweave. Big stories are Evelyn Nesbit. She was a socialite, basically, back in this. The book takes place in 1906 to the beginning of World War I. You have a story with Evelyn Nesbit, who's a socialite in that time period. She was in the middle of a scandal because her husband killed her lover, and so that's kind of where the book starts off. And you see the story. We see stories of feminism in its earliest stages. It's actually not even referred to as feminism within the book. It's referred to as anarchism. And while anarchism does kind of, in this book, discuss more than just the feminism, it's very clear that there wasn't a term, or B, anarchism was used more of as a derogatory thing to dismiss feminism. It addresses those issues of feminism. It also addresses the issue of race. There's immigration that's covered. They don't talk about wage and workers as much, which always seemed to me like a big historical thing from that time period. But they do talk about the idea of child slavery. They don't specify that if it's sexual slavery or not, although there are allusions to a lot of what we would consider sexual deviancies. There isn't that much in the way of detail on that aspect. As far as the slavery, it's not clear if it's for labor or for sex. There's a lot of talk about, one of the characters is J.P. Morgan, and it talks about how he was interested in building his own pyramid, and how he thought that he was the spirit of a great pharaoh from before. It's really interesting because it does really interweave the historical and the fictional, and it's hard. It blurs the line a lot. It's hard to determine what is historical and what is fictional. Clearly, that's the point of the book, and it does so in such a way that it's amazing. Usually it's a little more work for me to read some older stuff, even though it's enjoyable, but it's more work. This wasn't work at all. This was it had my attention immediately and kept it through the entire book. It was written in 1975, about 1906 to 1914. So the elements of the story are all supposed to be 100 years old or more now. In 2016, and there's a lot of it that's still going on today. There's talk about police abuse of, well, not police abuse, but governmental abuse of African Americans. There's issues with feminism and being dismissed and women being equal. And I think that when Doctorow wrote it, it was most likely that it looked like these things were finally getting resolved. And he was writing roughly 50 to 60 years after it was supposed to have happened, and now 100 years later, it's still going on, and we seem to have these steps where these things move forward and they move back. And I was reading things that were in this book, and on those same days, things were happening in the real world, in the news, that were mirroring them. Anyway, I would recommend Ragtime if you're a fan of history or fiction, but really, I mean, it's going to be interesting to you either way. There's talk about, you know, Houdini doing tricks, flying early planes, and so I really think that you won't have any. I feel like if you read this, you'll enjoy it from start to finish. Next book that I'm going to be reviewing is Beloved. If you are interested in reading anything that I've actually written, I have I will link below to my blog, which is short stories and poems, and I've also written a book that you can I'll have linked to that on the bottom as well. It's story and message is amazing. They seem to think, and he gets arrested because they think he's kidnapping her.